Thanks, Brian. Thanks for that intro. Clearly, Stantec doesn't just do great architecture, they do great introductions. This is the point in the program where I always tell myself, do not memorize the speech next year, just use the podium. They're taking it away, so I'm going to do this off the cuff. I want to say thank you to our sponsors, and I want to say thank you to everybody here for coming. It's a great crowd, and I know you're very interested in what we're doing. I want to shout out to all our partners for this summer. All of the airlines, our government agency partners, our business partners, our volunteers, because we had another tremendous summer. You know, just to put it in perspective, we were hitting 4,000 people an hour hitting into our customs hall on arrivals on the busy days. So did an amazing job, and our customer satisfaction numbers have remained really good. The graphic behind me represents the YVR Musqueam relationship, a really close relationship. We had a design competition, and a father-daughter team, Thomas Cannell and his daughter Summer, actually came up with this design. In their own words, it symbolizes opening of your hearts and your minds and showing vulnerability. So I raise my hands to you, and I welcome you to the unceded territory of the Squamish, the Musqueam, and the Tsleil-Waututh people. Now, we start every meeting at Vancouver, whether it's board of directors or a tool talk, with a talk about safety. So I'm going to do that. In the event of an emergency, you'll hear a two-stage alarm and probably a PA. We'll get up orderly, we'll walk out those doors into the courtyard, and then we'll muster and we'll find out what we're going to do next. I didn't do that as a stunt. We really take it that seriously. And I'm not going to talk a lot about safety through this talk, but I want you to know that everything we do, everything we build, every process we have, we start with safety first. It's our foundation. It's actually one of our core values. So let's dive in. This is my 6th GVBot talk. Usually I talk about how the year went, or the past couple of years, some hook about the present and the future. I'll talk about the 4 pillars of sustainability, which we take tremendously seriously: social and governance, environment, and economic. I'm going to do that, but we're going to do it in a slightly different mode. We're going to use a fictional thing, a time machine. We're going to go back and forth in time and back to the present, of course. So let's start out with that beautiful year of 1992. It was a simpler time. Brian Mulroney was Prime Minister. Baby Got Back by Sir Mix-a-Lot was #1. Apparently Ian Black's favorite song. Probably listened to it on a Sony Walkman, wearing his skates. A youngish Craig Richmond was just finishing serving in the Air Force, holding the forces of darkness at bay. And, but the most noteworthy thing about 1992 is that is the year that Transport Canada transferred ownership or operation of the airport to the Vancouver Airport Authority. And there's a great little clip here from The Sun at the time, July 1st, 1992, and the second line there, "It's officially ours." Love that phrase. It's ours. The Airport Authority belongs to everybody in the province of BC. It was a seminal moment in Canadian aviation history. I've been doing a lot of reading about the transfer lately, and you know, over the past 27 years, the authorities across Canada have made immeasurable contributions to the Canadian economy, to their local economies and the national economy. A vital role in tourism and business, and of course, a tremendous enabler of infrastructure, cargo, business travel, all of that. It's not me saying that these are something special, these airports. In 2013, the World Economic Forum said that Canada has the best airport infrastructure in the world. Not surprising. In the 20 years leading to transfer from 72 to 92, Transport Canada invested a total of $1 billion in all the airports. And since 92 to 2018, the Canadian airport authorities have invested $26 billion in airports in Canada. Not a bit of that, thank you. And I'm done. But not a bit of that taxpayer money. You know, an amazingly successful policy. And I think it's really solid proof that there's something to this model and that we're doing it right from Vancouver to Halifax and from Gander back to Prince George. And there was something that the government did I think was critical, is they didn't just say, here's the keys, you know, land airplanes safely, don't make any noise, or not much noise, which we do. They said, look, you need to take this amazing asset you're being handed stewardship of and provide social and economic benefits to our communities. So our mandate is very clear: social and economic benefit, and our operating structure of being a not-for-profit company allows us to really think about this, the airport, in a different way. It was Rick Antonson, the previous CEO of Tourism Vancouver, who kind of popularized this term, cathedral thinking. And it comes from the idea that the great cathedrals in Europe, you were a stonemason working on it, you would never see this thing finished. You know, you actually knew that you would not live to see the completion of the cathedral. That's the way we think about the airport. We'll be handing it off. It's always been that way. Back when the airport was a lot smaller in 1947, the very first airport manager, William Templeton, actually put on paper where the north runway would be, within meters, exactly the length, exactly where he knew it would need to be, and we didn't get around to actually opening it for 49 years. But that's the kind of long-term thinking that we think of. We want to be stewards of this thing. We want to think of cathedral thinking. We're never going to see it end. His role and my role and the next CEO is to pass it on to the next generation. Okay, so let's just talk about airports in general. What are they? Well, essentially, they are like an old railroad terminal. People and stuff comes in, gets on an airplane, and people and stuff get off an airplane and go away. And so it really is, in concept, quite simple. And so many people have said, some critics have said, well, why don't you just make it more utilitarian? Make it a box, you know? What's with all the cool stuff and the art in the airport? Well, I'll tell you why. I think you probably know why. But research shows that if there's art and nice lighting and good textures and nice carpeting and it's nice and quiet, that people like it. And that it's more serene and calming. And then they'll come back. And when they're there, they'll spend more money. And that money, which I'm going to label non-aeronautical revenue, and you'll hear that several times in my presentation, that non-aeronautical revenue helps us to run the place, and the more we can make of that, less we have to charge the airlines. The airlines then want to come and bring more airplanes. That's more passengers, more non-aero. It's a virtuous cycle. And I did a little bit of research and looking out at some comparable organizations, for example, in municipalities. If you have a development, you are encouraged, most municipalities around Vancouver, to spend about 1% on art or amenities. At Vancouver, we spend maybe between 1/4 and 0.5% of our capital budget. So if anything, we're not spending enough. And it's not just us. Since 1996, when we opened up the international terminal and the Jade Canoe and our Musqueam welcoming figures were prominently displayed, there hasn't been an airport from Kuala Lumpur to Kamloops that hasn't tried to capture a local sense of place through art and architecture. It brings people that come home to the airport, love it. People that are international passengers love the art as well. It ties us to our Indigenous roots in Vancouver. It's a beautiful sense of place. People spend more money, it makes business sense. So let's put to bed the idea that art in a terminal is a bad idea. Now, we don't dismiss criticisms and we don't think we have everything right. We go out to the public every year and we say, what do you think of the airport? And this year, we got a 75% approval rating, which is pretty good. We are still staying in the 90s for our customer service, and remarkably, we are the 3rd most loved brand in BC. I find that amazing because airports are almost designed to bug you. And for us to be the 3rd most loved brand is remarkable. And we know that opinion is formed at the airport. You know, not because of our logo or anything, but how it goes for you at the airport. So that's why we spend so much time on remarkable customer experiences. Now, one area we've been lagging behind is in food and beverage. Well, no longer. We are going to be putting something in front of you that you're going to love. Great culinary experience, transformative, with brands like Dirty Apron, Sally Limon, breweries like Red Truck, Whistler Brewing Company, and Steamworks. Hawksworth is going into Sea Pier, and Illy Cafe just opened post-security. So that's about 1/4 of the new offerings that we're going to have. And if you get in that trusty time machine and go forward a few years, what you're going to find is it's not just going to be art and what the place looks like that gives you a sense of place. It's going to be a local food and beverage experience. By the way, that's happening all across Canada. In that same vein, shopping is very important. For instance, take the MacArthur Glen Designer Outlet Center. We own 50% of that. Phase 2 just opened, and it's doing very well. And that means more non-aeronautical spend, which then, you could probably recite this with me by now, then means more jobs, means more airplanes, keeping the fees down for our airlines. Now, all of these experiences help us in terms of growing passengers in the economy. It's a virtuous cycle of success, and it's all powered by the airport. Get that non-aeronautical revenue up, keep it going, keep the airline fees down. Now, speaking of that survey, we had one really frowny face, and that was parking. Because we had to get rid of the value lot to make way for our new 6-story parkade, and people were saying, look, I can't find a place to park. We also had to get rid of some parking to make room for airplane parking, and so we said to our parking team, look, can you fix this? And they rapidly came up with the idea of the jet set parking. So you can book online, drop your car off, 3-minute bus ride up to the terminal, and because we know when you're coming back, we have your car waiting and ready for you. It works really well. It's not glamorous parking, but you know what? It's huge for customer service and satisfaction, and it's a great source of non-aeronautical revenue, which translates into, you can follow me along, jobs, keeping the airline fees down in a virtuous cycle. Every decision we make is with that mandate in mind and with that non-aeronautical revenue in mind, every retail outlet that we put in place. Now, innovation is one of our core attributes, not just in parking, all over the airport. In fact, we think so highly of innovation, we have a department, Innovative Travel Solutions, that looks at all the problems we have in the terminal. And there are always issues, and they look at issues and they say, I think we could fix this. One of the ones that they looked at and came up with a solution was in both arriving in customs and going out to the US. And it was our kiosk program, basically the passport kiosk, which I'm sure most of you have used. And what we found is, look, if we solve the problem in Vancouver, other airports will look at us and say, look, I'd like to buy that. So that's turned into a revenue generator for us, and we've now sold 1,600 of these things. That's what 1,600 kiosks looks like. And we've sold them all over North America and in the Caribbean, and from now Barbados to Iceland and Cyprus, and it's not stopping. We're still selling them all over the world. Now that actually results in high-paying jobs in both manufacturing and software in Vancouver as well. And that money, of course, all goes back into non-aeronautical revenue. They're doing a lot of other things. Some of them I can't tell you about, but one that I can is we're taking all the technology from our kiosks, putting them in the government Nexus machines. They're going to be a lot faster, a lot more reliable. And so for those Nexus card holders out there, you're going to love it. If you don't have a Nexus card, you should get one. So this puzzle's coming together. Talked about art, architecture, how food and beverage and shopping and parking and selling kiosks all helps the airport come together. Let's talk about the basics of our business, which is putting people on planes. We just completed an amazing growth streak of 74 consecutive months of growth since May 2013. 74 months. We've never had anything like it at the airport. And you might have heard that last year we welcomed just shy of 26 million passengers. That's like half of a busy day. We would have been at 26 million. In the last 5 years, we've gone from 19 million to just shy of 26 million. Hopping in the time machine back to 1992, you can see that our growth has almost tripled over that time. Staggering increase over a relatively short period of time. Now, this is not by accident. When passenger figures go up, of course, that really impacts the economy. And we just got some figures yesterday, or last week, that I'm sharing with you today that are really quite staggering. Last time we did this was in 2015, and the total output, economic output of the airport now is $20 billion. It was 16 4 years ago. Total GDP is 10.4, 1.4 billion of total government revenue. These are really huge figures. So when we bring aircraft in, boy, you know it's going to have an effect. That last 4 years has been tremendous for the province. We're all about creating jobs, and I'm very happy to announce that we now have over 26,500 people working at the airport, directly at the airport. Big employer in the Lower Mainland. And here's a more exciting stat, I think, 126,000 around the province as a result of airport activities. So you're talking about 160,000 people involved because of the airport. A huge driver of employment in the province of BC. And every time we get a new route, such as the Air Canada route to Auckland, which will start up in December, that's another 40 jobs. And it's only seasonal. When it goes full-time, which we hope it will be very soon. Where's your Canada table? That's 300 full-time jobs. So you can see why our Air Service Development Department is always trying to drive more routes to Vancouver. Now, remember that mandate we have, social and economic benefits. Well, what's the social side? You know, the community at the airport and the airport authority, we take this part of our business really seriously. One of the obvious ways that we give back is, like all of you, through donations to various community groups like Quest Food Exchange, Vancouver Adaptive Snow Sports, Oceanwise. And of course, we're not doing that for recognition, or there's no monetary reason. It's a good idea to give every community an opportunity to experience life to the fullest. But the way that I think that I was really impressed when I first started the airport back in the 90s, and this goes all the way back, if you use that time machine, back to the board of directors and the management back in the early 90s, is they said the airport's got to be accessible. We really work on that. I'm very proud of our experiential accessibility tours with the Canucks Autism Network, Spinal Injury BC with the CNIB, and if you're from that community, you can come out to the airport and at your own pace and when you're comfortable, go through the entire process. And we think that gives people the confidence to travel. I get letters from families that have a child on the autism spectrum and say, we never thought we could go to Disneyland, but after doing our experience at the airport, we went. And I think, there's just nothing wrong with that. It just makes good business sense, it makes good community sense. And on a larger scale, having that kind of reputation means come on into BC, come through Vancouver Airport, and you'll have a great trip. This past year, YVR was awarded gold level certification by the Rick Hansen Foundation, which I think is the highest score that they've given to a building yet. So think about that. The biggest building in BC that gets like 2 million people a month in the summer, and it's also the most accessible. It's a real tribute to the previous management and board of directors and the current team that works hard to keep the airport very accessible. We also provide a leadership position, maybe you could say a role model in various social issues like diversity and inclusion, Indigenous relations, and environmental stewardship. Last year, we were named one of Canada's best diversity employers, and we given an Employment Equity Award by the Government of Canada. We work with the President's Group. In fact, I'm the co-chair of that group, and the entire purpose of that group is to put persons with disabilities to work. If you're not part of the Accessible Employers CA, there's a pitch that I didn't tell my team I would do, you should go to that website. We actually have a job fair at Vancouver Airport on the 24th of September. If you know somebody who's looking for work who's disabled, please send them our way. Our partnership with the Musqueam is really amazing and groundbreaking. Yes, there's revenue sharing in this, but that's just part of it. Scholarships, apprenticeships, contracting, and procurement. And we've only had this agreement with the Musqueam for 2 years, and there's now 90 Musqueam working at the airport, 90 people, in everything from security to operations and maintenance and into food and beverage. And I just can't imagine what it's going to look like in 10 years. In 2019, we signed the Minerva Pledge, commitment to gender parity in the workplace, and you know what? We're almost there. More than 50% of the executive team are women, 40% of our entire workplace is women, and of course they have equal pay. We don't just paint a rainbow on our logo for Pride Week. We implement real-world solutions for millions of people who might otherwise be marginalized when they travel. Because we believe that diversity and inclusion is very important. Everybody who comes through our doors is important, and everybody's different, and everybody counts. So I would just say to you, look at your own organization and make meaningful investments if you're falling short in any area. I assure you it'll be worth it for your business, your reputation, for your employees. Now, clearly I need a glass of water, so I'm going to put up a picture of one of our employees and some airplanes for 5 seconds. That's actually Flight. One of our wildlife dogs. Yes, those are doggy goggles. And if you can't put up a picture of a dog with goggles, why be the CEO? So to quickly recap, so far I've talked about our public mandate, the economic impact, jobs, community contributions. So who holds us accountable? Well, one of the key features of the Canadian airport operating model is a community-appointed board of directors. Some federal appointees, some from the local communities, some from professional organizations, such as the lawyers and accountants. These are not private shareholders looking to maximize dividends, nor are they elected officials mindful of the next election cycle. They, like me and the rest of our team, we're thinking always about delivering on our public mandate and what kind of airport we will leave when we pass the baton to the next board, the next CEO, the next management team. I'd like to welcome several of the board members. I know you saw some of them today, but first of all, Annalisa King, who took over as the chair in June, and board members there at the table. I don't think they want to stand up, and I'm not going to order them to. And our previous chair, Mary Jordan. Hi, Mary, good to see you, who gave up the baton in June. And George Cadman, who was the previous chair of our governance committee. Let's give a round of applause to my bosses. So our social leadership extends to the global issue of climate change, and everybody's working very hard on this and very interested in it. What are we doing in this space? Well, I'm really proud to say that since 2012, even though we've increased by 8.5 million passengers in that time, we've actually dropped our emissions by 11%. We've done that by replacing all the airfield and apron lighting with modern LED lighting, by investing in energy-efficient buildings and electrifying the ground fleet. Two trends we're really keeping an eye on: biofuels and e-planes. Is Greg here from Harbour Air? I didn't see you. Hey, nice. Hey, you're in a tie. Nice to see you. Our friends at Harbour Air are actually going to electrify their fleet, and they're going to have a de Havilland Beaver by about November that is going to be electric. I promise the real one will have wings. We're actually going to reduce our landing and terminal fees for airlines that use biojet or have electric aircraft. I think we haven't figured exactly how to do that, but I think that's the right thing to do. So in the terminal, we make every effort to reduce our footprint in small ways, like Oscar, our robot that helps you decide how to sort your garbage. We've incubated that technology. And industry-leading programs like Project Green, which help all of our Sea Island businesses to reduce their environmental footprint and wastewater and emissions. And of course, we're investing heavily in new sustainable buildings. Our new parkade will feature rainwater recapture, electric vehicle charging, and automated parking guidance. So that will reduce people looking for a stall, which will help with customer satisfaction, but of course also reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Very exciting, beside that, is our biggest single project ever, our GeoExchange building, which basically, there's 800 wells. They go down 500 feet and use the temperature differential from there to the surface to pre-cool or preheat, depending on the season, the airport terminal. This will come into operation in 2022 and will reduce our greenhouse gases significantly. Another way that we build sustainably is through thinking about incrementalism. We don't want to overbuild the terminal. Our terminal is based on expanding from the center in an incremental basis, because if you look at that graph from just a few minutes ago, you'll see that there's times when there are some pretty long pauses. For example, you can see around the 2000s, the SARS dip. And I'm not talking about short-term impacts like the 737 MAX, which is happening to us right now. And it's having a very strong effect on us this year and into next year, but we can see an end to it. I'm talking more about the macro issues like the Great Recession between 07, 08, and 12, where we really had a flat line for quite a while. So what we do to protect ourselves against that is what we call busing, or RSO, remote stand operations, what you would probably think of as busing. So instead of all pricey new bridge gates, we actually built hold rooms at ground level. They're very nice. They look just like upstairs. Bought some electric buses, and now we can move you out to these parking spots. So if there is a downturn, we're not heating and cooling and cleaning a lot more building. In fact, we've incorporated this into our new Pier D expansion. You can see here we have 4 modern bridged gates, and that's great, and that'll be a great capacity increase. But we also have 4 busing gates out of the weather underneath that if they're not used, they just sit there, and if we need them to capture some new flights, we have them. So how do we pay for these things? The parkade, the new pier, all of the things that go into an airport. Because I'll tell you something, running an airport is not cheap. We have hundreds of very heavy aircraft, up to 1 million pounds, landing and taking off of the runways every day. We have tens of thousands of people, 90,000 on a day in the summer, that are walking through the terminals. That means we have to replace the flooring, we have to replace washrooms. The baggage system, now I said to our graphic artist, it literally beats itself to death. I meant figuratively. So be very careful with graphic artists. They will actually take you literally. But the baggage system is 25 kilometers and carries hundreds of thousands of kilos a week and needs replacing every 10 years. Airports are just voracious eaters of capital. So how do we pay? Well, the first is we incur a lot of debt. In fact, by the end of this year, we'll be approaching $1 billion in debt. But you know what? We have a AA credit rating, one of the only airport in North America, one of 4 in the world. And that gives us a lot of goodwill with our bond issuers, keeps our interest rates down because we're thinking out long term. For actual sources of revenue, we have 3. First one is aeronautical revenue. This is what we charge airlines. So for landing and on the runways and taking off and the aprons and the buildings, it's 25% of our revenue. The second one is that one I've been talking about, non-aeronautical. That's 44%, and that's everything food and beverage, parking, selling kiosks. By the way, that's a very high percentage. We'd love to get that up to 50%, but a lot of airports in Canada don't make that number. All this money, of course, goes back into running the business, but despite our very adept management, it's not nearly enough. We wouldn't be able to keep up if it was not for the third source of revenue, which is the Airport Improvement Fee, or the AIF. YVR was the first airport in Canada to introduce one in July of 1993. Every other major airport in Canada now has an AIF. I don't want to bore you with numbers, I'll just give you a couple. We have collected $2.2 billion in the form of the AIF since we started in 1993. We have spent $3.7 billion on capital investments in the terminal. So that difference, that $1.5 billion, is cash flow and borrowing. Clearly you can see we're spending a lot more than we're actually collecting from the AIF. So which projects? All of them that you're familiar with. The Canada line cost us $300 million, worth every penny. 20% of our staff and of our passengers use it every day. The North Runway, $111 million. I don't know, it'd be $1 billion or north of that now, and I'm not even sure we could get it built. Worth every penny again. The Airside Operations Building, vital aspect of our ability to run a safe airport, $55 million. There's a bunch of other projects. The AB connector, the baggage backbone, the entire international terminal, the runway and safety areas. The list goes on and on. And those are in addition to our 20-year, multi-billion-dollar capital expansion plans that we've planned out very carefully, sequentially, and when needed due to traffic. It's about 75 projects, and it'll support safe and sustainable growth for the airport. So, none of these projects would have been possible without the AIF. It's a vital part of our operating model. It's not going away. People might not realize that versions of this exist all over the world. In Australia, for example, they have the passenger movement charge, which is $60 Australian. In the UK, it's the air passenger duty, which is a varying amount, but all large. And the problem is that money goes into the government. At YVR, you know that when you pay the AIF, you know exactly where it's going. It's going into the ground. It's building new things at the terminal. It's a user pay system. It's not a tax, because if you don't fly, you don't pay it. So the invite for today teased an announcement, and here it is. That news is that the airport improvement fee at Vancouver will be going up to $25 as of the 1st of January 2020. Now, I realize that that's probably not going to be too popular. But we looked very carefully at our debt load, at our asset capital plans, at our interest coverage ratio, at future possibilities for passenger growth, and therefore non-aeronautical revenue and aeronautical revenue. And we realized it's time. Because remember, we're not thinking short term, we're thinking long term. Without this increase, we would not be able to have the capacity to capture the traffic that we need to grow the economy of BC, and the overall passenger experience would decline because the terminal would get old and crowded. Or we would incur too much debt, be over-leveraged in the next downturn, which I'm sure all of you in this room would agree is a bad idea. Now, these negative outcomes would not happen right away. They would take years, probably after I'm gone, probably after the current board, or most of it is gone. But thinking like that is not being an appropriate steward of this amazing BC asset. It's not thinking sustainably long-term. It's not thinking in that cathedral thinking. Because we want to make sure that the health of the airport drives a healthy economy. So if you got in that time machine and you went ahead 5, 10, 20 years, you would see an airport with a healthy, viable financial platform and not a board of directors that hands are tied and they're struggling with drastic decisions and cutting back capital or services or both. So we still compare very well, by the way. There's only one airport in Canada lower at $23, that's Ottawa. Montreal, Halifax, Calgary, and Edmonton are all higher, as you can see here. We're tied with Toronto and Winnipeg. We're one of only 2 Canadian airports to have kept the AIF at $5 for intra-BC travel, and Yukon, so you'd pay $5 to fly anywhere in BC or the Yukon. And we're not putting this up here to criticize our airline colleagues across Canada, but just to show the context of what this increase will mean. So we're coming towards the end of my presentation. I haven't mentioned something which we normally talk about, and I gotta say it. We won the best airport in North America for 10 years in a row this year. Thank you. Why I love it is because 13 million people voted on it, and it's about everybody at the airport. It's not the airport authority, it's everybody. It's customs, it's the airlines, it's the baggage handlers, and we have been voted by those passengers 10 years in a row. Do you know there's no other airport or airline in Skytrax history that has ever won 10 in a row? So real testament to how seriously the people out at YVR take this. Yeah, we're a great community partner and economic contributor, and things are going well, but you know what? There are serious challenges coming that threaten us, and as a result, the health of the region. I mentioned the 737 MAX issue. Yes, it's a problem right now, but I think we can all agree that that will end next year sometime. On a larger scale, competition with Seattle is going to be very stiff. They're a good airport team, they're building a new terminal, and they want exactly the same passengers that we want. They're going to be real competition. If we didn't have that 737 MAX issue, I would have been up here talking about the geopolitical situation, and that's not good, right? Trade, tariff wars, political unrest in some of our major destinations, none of that is good. Now, we're up to those challenges, but of course, we need your support, and of course, we need to remain financially stable. So we will be raising the AIF. I hope I have convinced you why that's important, and I've taught a little bit about why your local airport matters. I also hope you've gained a little understanding of how an airport is financed and appreciation of the Canadian airport model. You know, I really believe in it. I stand up to talk about it because I think it is an amazing model that has provided tremendous opportunities for Canada. It may come under threat again in the next few years. I hope you realize that we are strong stewards of this amazing asset, and I want to thank the media that are here and have gotten the whole story, and I hope I've given you enough information for your viewers and your listeners and your readers. I know that the headline is going to be YVR increases AIF. I am an optimist, but I'm a realist. But I hope you have the context to put that in place. I hope you concentrate on the value and not the cost. You know, we in BC, we have a great international airport. Here you see the value, putting in Pier D. You get the best airport in North America. We're continually upgrading it. Here's some pictures of what that Pier D is going to look like. It'll be the last thing that people leaving BC see, and they're going to want to come back. Beautiful terminal with a forest in the middle, paid for by the AIF, a world-class facility, and we're going to have openings, and we're going to be inviting all of you, and I hope to see you there. You'll see some details on that in the months to come. So thank you for listening to me.